Welcome to the Truth and Liberty Show, where trusted leaders bring biblical insights to important issues to help you stand for truth and effect godly change in our nation and in our world.
Hi, and welcome to Truth and Liberty. I'm Janet Porter. I'm your guest host today, and it's a privilege to be back with you. We have a very special guest with us as well, but first I want to tell you about how you can join Truth and Liberty. Just go to truthandliberty.net. You can get your free gift when you do. It's a biblical worldview on racism. And you're going to want to get this, especially in light of what we've just discovered from an organization that's been raising money on the basis of fighting racism, but they've been using it to create it. That's what we're talking about today. It's one of the many issues with the Southern Poverty Law Center. But we've got a guy who is a guest today. He's been around for a long time. I knew him first as a congressman out of the great state of Ohio. You'll recognize this side is the motto of our fair state. With God, all things are possible. Sixth-term member of Congress. He's on the board of Family Talk with Dr. James Dobson, and I've known him for many years as the executive director of the Council for National Policy, and also on the board of Turning Point. We're just so grateful to have you, one of the most articulate people that I know, former Congressman Bob McEwen. Welcome, Bob.
Well, Janet, it's my honor to be with you as always. Thank you.
It's a privilege. Boy, there's so much to talk about. I guess just to get us started, we have seen groups targeted by the Southern Poverty Law Center. They basically have been manufacturing all kinds of racism and then blaming us for it. Interesting. And it wasn't so long ago that we saw the results of that. Not only was Faith to Action, I was put on the list, so was Turning Point. Charlie Kirk talked about it as being as a badge of honor, but it may be that they looked at that hate map, which I think should be called People We Hate map, and they used it with the Family Research Council. That shooter, as you may recall, looked at the map, he was armed with Chick-fil-A sandwiches, started shooting, shot the receptionist, the guard there at the front door, and the plan was to put Chick-fil-A sandwiches and put them in their face and then go to Traditional Values Coalition. They were the ones that said, hey, you in the military, we're going to put it in a slideshow that you're not allowed to listen to American Family Radio because they're on the Southern Poverty hate list. All kinds of things are now coming out about that organization that has been using its money to gin up racism and then blame us for it. Let's listen to what the Department of Justice had to say just this week.
In total, according to the indictment, between 2014 and 2023, SPLC paid at least $3 million to 8 individuals at least. These individuals were affiliated with the Ku Klux Klan, United Klans of America, National Socialist Movement, Aryan Nations Affiliated Sadistic Souls Motorcycle Club, the Nationalist Socialist Party of America, Nazis, and the American Front. Now, as the indictment lays out, after SPLC paid members of these extremist groups, it created work product that reported on these activities that the members participated in or contributed to. And to that end, it was doing the exact opposite of what it's told its donors it was doing.
The Southern Poverty Law Center themselves advertise to raise money to dismantle violent extremist groups for a period of at least a decade. They use their donor network to raise money to purportedly dismantle violent extremist groups. However, the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, used the money they raised from their donor network to actually pay the leadership of these very groups.
So here they were using donor money that they got on the pretense of help us fight racism, and then they gave over $3 million to the racist groups you've heard about, from the Ku Klux Klan to the Aryan Race Motorcycle Group, the National Socialist Association. It's really appalling. It's sort of like, I guess, Bob, the way I'd put it is, if I was trying to say, hey, everybody, we're trying to fight abortion, so give us money to end abortion, and we're going to use that money to give to Planned Parenthood and to funnel into the abortion industry. It's appalling, and yet that's what they're doing, and they got caught. What do you say to that?
You're exactly right. And the thing is, the reason for it is that the United States, there's no nation like it in the world. It's the standard for righteousness in the world. It's the most godly nation on earth. It's the most Christian nation on earth. And as a result, it's the wealthiest nation on earth. This little 4% of the population of the world produces nearly a third of all the goods and services on the entire planet. The other 96% are behind. They don't make as many inventions or copyrights as the United States does. The entire world doesn't. So if you're going to take down America for 150 years, they've tried socialism and communism. And socialism and communism, as it makes its effort and it comes forward, people see the total destruction that it brings. The fourth richest nation in the Western Hemisphere, Venezuela, it turns it into the point that it's competing with Cuba as being the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere after it has 15 years of socialism. They had to empty the zoos. There are no cats or dogs in Caracas. In fact, they even ate the zoo animals because it brings poverty. So if the left tries to tear down America, it has a struggle, and it can't do it on making its petition, and so it tries to bring things up. And it says that America, for example, America is racist. Well, it just very simply, try to think of any nation on earth in the history of man where more divergent people lived as peacefully as they do in America. So they have to deliberately, whether it be Biden or Obama, you have to go around and say, this is a racist nation, how terrible it is, on and on, because all of the people that they say are crawling over cut glass and barbed wire and floating in leaky boats to get to this place that they say is so awful because they know that's a lie. And so rather than sell socialism, rather than sell their poverty, rather than sell their homelessness, rather than sell their criminality, that is the nature of the 22 blue dots that are America, Philadelphia, Cleveland, Detroit, Los Angeles, etc. Most of America is overwhelmingly red. Most of America is overwhelmingly good. And in order to take down that country, you have to convince them that America is not good. And so they do this, they get in the schools, and they get in the other institutions like the media, and they make these things up. And so they pay, as in Charlottesville, they pay people to go down there and create this racist and to say these racist things. And people will do almost anything for money. I mean, if you look at some of the people on MSNBC and some of these on The View, you can see they can hire these people that once had great reputations, but you give them a few $1 million, they'll say almost anything if they lack moral character. And that is what the Southern Poverty Law Center did, is that it raised millions of dollars, and they discovered exactly as you said. If you want to get rid of abortion, for you to go pay the abortion creators, you would say, look how horrible that is. Well, that's what they did here. They went around and they put on a parade in Charlottesville and then bragged about how evil these people were and doubled an additional $86 million a year. The next year, they took in $86 million more than they did the year before. They doubled their revenue by putting on this show. And most Americans, and believe hardly we don't think like that. And let me just say, in the book Rules for Radicals, it talks about how the left wanted to go picket George Bush. And the author of that book said, no, don't do that. Go get Nazi symbols and say, we as Nazis support George Bush. We like George Bush. And by doing that you will have called him a Nazi. People will look at it because the Nazis are supporting him. And it's right there in the book of Rules for Radicals. That's the first chapter. That's exactly what SPLC did. They went around and took good organizations, people like Turning Point, people like all the things that you and I admire, the people that help the homeless and help the poor and bring people to Christ, bring and care for veterans. And they attack those people as being haters. Now, the thing is about the media is you don't have to prove anything. You can call anybody a name. My father used to say, and one of the reason he had so much frustration with my profession, he was a physician and greatly admired, and he said, I can show up every day and I have respect. He said, you're in politics, people can accuse you of anything the next day. And he said, a person with a reputation is always at the mercy of a person with no reputation. So when the mayor's walking down the street in a parade and somebody picks up mud and throws it at the mayor, nobody looks to see who was the person that threw the mud. They just see the mayor wiping the mud off of his face. And that's what those who stand for righteousness, that's where we fight this battle. And that's what the SPLC was the best at it. And periodically, a Ronald Reagan or Donald Trump will come along and right this ship a bit. And we are living in a golden age, a wonderful time in which the people Joe Biden, he said the reason I ran for office. Now we don't believe that, but he just wanted to tout what they had done. He said was because of what they did in Charlottesville, those evil haters. That's why I ran for president. Well, he'd been running for president for 40 years. So what did that have to do with it? That's immaterial. The fact is they used it as a vehicle to attack Donald Trump, to attack those of us who believe in biblical values by calling us names because they can't sell the homelessness, the poverty, the open borders, the child molestation and trafficking that is the symbol of their government when they take office. So that's where we are.
And it's interesting that the Biden administration has used, as did the Obama administration, used the information, the trumped up charges that they manufactured racism and then blamed us for it. And then they used that to say, oh, don't give any kind of government contract. Hey, military, don't listen to American Family Radio. I had a very mild encounter when the bank, Chase Bank, I had a graphic artist. It was a state representative's his wife that did my graphic artist when I ran for Congress. And they wouldn't take my check. So I had to go to the bank and explain here, I'm paying them for this service. And it was because Faith to Action had made the list, which I think is a badge of honor. And there are people I walked up to and said, hey, you're not on that list? Well, maybe you need to step it up, because they targeted the people that they viewed as a threat. It's very much like what we saw with President Trump. They said, well, I've studied assassinations. Here they are, questioning him, why does everybody want to shoot you? He says, well, they don't come after the non-consequential people that aren't making an impact. They are targeting him specifically because he's making such a big difference, and because he's doing so much good. It's the people that on the left that hate him. That's really what's been happening, and we're going to find out in the weeks ahead of justice being served. And I believe that justice is going to finally be served with the Southern Poverty Law Center. I believe they should shut it down, because as you mentioned Charlottesville, they incited that. There was a death there. There was a killing that took place. So I believe that not only do they have the indictments of the money laundering and all of the wire fraud and all the rest, but they've got blood on their hands, and from what I can tell.
Well, and Janet, we were so close to the edge. We were so close to losing this country, and they succeeded so much that when you have milquetoast opponents, that when we take office, we really don't do anything, and then they just keep moving the window a little bit further down the road. We were so close to losing what America is, bringing in 25 million Americans, bringing in 25 million people to help shore up their votes of people who don't know America, weren't born in America, don't know anything about America, and to allow them to vote, and not even citizens. And of course, they complain about that. But the reason that the Department of Homeland Security is closed at this moment, as we speak, there's no funding for the Secret Service. There's no funding for the Coast Guard. There's no funding for the border agents. So why is that? It's because Democrats want to put in a provision in the law that says that immigration customs enforcement, those who enforce immigration, those who are charged with protecting our country, it's sort of the alarm around our house. You're not allowed to turn it on. They want a provision that says that ICE cannot function in areas of a voting booth, within proximity to a voting booth. Now, why would they do that? Why would they do that? Because they know these millions of people that they brought in over these recent years are voting. And so they won't even fund anything until they force the President Trump and the Republicans by one vote, and forcing the Republicans to allow them to do that. Now, that's how close we are to losing our elected officials. Then you think about the human trafficking, where they brought in literally 1 million of children. When these children would come across the border under Donald Trump, and this one man would sit there with 3 little boys and 2 little girls and say, all 5 of these children, aged 5 and 6, they're all my children. Under Donald Trump, you have to do a DNA swap. Now, you know how that is? You just take a Q-tip and go right inside their cheek. It takes a split second, doesn't hurt or do anything. But as soon as the Democrats took office, as soon as Kamala Harris was made the czar for the border, the first thing they did was do away with that, so that they could bring these children, of which we know that 300,000 to 500,000 of them have disappeared. Now, this human trafficking of these young children, that's the kind of things that the evil of that is hard to grasp. And yet you and I, Janet, You and I know of people who voted to continue that. And praise God, we got a president that the second he put in, he closed the border, he quit the human trafficking, he stopped the fentanyl traffic. I was just talking to an officer the other day. He said fentanyl has just disappeared off of the radar screen. It doesn't. They can't find it on the street anymore. He's cleaning up America left and right. How close we were to losing our nation. And then when we look at this the Southern Poverty Law Center, where they were going after those organizations. And with this, we can change topics. But you mentioned about the fact that you couldn't process a check. I would encourage anyone that has a moment to read the new book that just came out from Eric Trump and to see, and this is what started my reaction to what you said. It wasn't just you and me. They went after the Trumps. They shut off the First Lady's credit cards on the first day. On the afternoon of January 20th, they shut off over 300 accounts of their businesses. That is, that when a person checked into a Trump hotel, so you can't check in, or you can't process the payment. You can't pay for the food that's coming that day. To totally destroy their businesses. The degree to which the left, the degree to which Democrats, the degree to which Biden and Kamala Harris and Obama and these people, the degree to which they went to destroy people like you who wanted to run for office. And so when this idea, we have two sides of either coin. The good side is praise God for a leader and for pulling us back from the brink and giving us a chance. And I hope that in the next few minutes, we can talk about how America is in a better position than it's been in decades. This is an exciting, exciting time. But the other side of that coin is how close we were to losing it all. Because there are people who are voting, as we see here, people who are giving billions of dollars to destruction, to go down to the very people such as Janet Porter could not cash a check, to use the power to go from people who think correctly, like Donald Trump, down through the Christian organizations, that they shut off their capacity to get loans, and or even you and I to function. So it's a spiritual battle. It's a constant battle. But good old Apostle Paul. Apostle Paul went through a little bit harder than we did, got left for dead a couple of times, driven out of the city and all. This is part of it, and I'm glad to be a part.
Yeah, you know what? Praise God that he rescued America. You know, there's a lot of things I want to say to that. One thing you mentioned is when they were doing the DNA tests and then they stopped doing them under the Biden administration. It's interesting. The very people that yell the loudest about the Epstein list are the very ones who are enabling the child trafficking to take place. They're the ones that are lowering the consent ages in legislations and with legislatures. And I like what President Trump just did. He renamed ICE. It's now the National Immigration and Customs Enforcement. It's nice. So now every time they talk about it, they're going to have to talk about the nice agents. And you bring up another point, too, about voting. You know, God spared us. Everybody I talked to was really bracing how, you know, you remember election night. It looked like it was going to be a repeat of what happened in 2020 when, oh my goodness, are they shutting things down to switch them again? God gave us a reprieve. But as Benjamin Franklin said, we've got a republic if we can keep it. And I'm not sure we're equipped to keep it right now. The Save America Act has not passed in the Senate. You got any take on that? If we don't have free and fair elections, we may not have a country moving forward.
Well, you know, and I think about Beth Moore and John Piper and all these people that support this kind of change in our government, to take it away from the values that have made it the envy of the world. It's such a frustration, but it's a constant battle. There's always reason. As you know, Janet, you and I lived through Jimmy Carter. The country was spiraling out of control in the 1970s. More countries went communist than any time since Truman, and 18% inflation, 22% interest rates, gas lines. Now think that's half a century ago. Jimmy Carter was president, and we know now, a half a century later, that we still have more natural gas than the rest of the world combined. We have more oil and gas than any other nation on earth, and yet he had gas lines because he said we were running out. He shut down in Ohio. He shut down the natural gas. We lost 2,300 acres that were under glass because he didn't give them 30 days in order to transfer to oil to heat the glass houses that had oil that had vegetables and flowers, put families out of business because we're running out of natural gas in a day at any moment. So those people are always fearful, and that's where the country was. But under proper leadership, when the country had lost its ways and people were so fearful, and the Soviet Union was on the rise, and it said that by the end of the 1980s, the Soviet Union, that Leonid Brezhnev said in a conference in Africa, we, the Soviet Union, will be able to work our will any place on the planet because the correlation of forces, economic, military, and political, are on the side of socialism and communism. And that election night in 1980, a man said, there's nothing wrong with America that proper leadership can't cure. And that nation that had lost its wheels, that was sitting around unable to function, having lost its way, cities in collapse, and found out that by the end of that 1980s, because of new leadership, the entire world was chanting USA, USA, and 3 out of every 4 jobs on the planet in that decade were made in one country, the United States. So having lived through that, I can see that leadership makes a difference. And when I see what's happening now, that it's always a battle, it's always a fight, and we wish that the Congress would come through. We have a very narrow margin, but that's the benefit of leaders like Charis Bible College and other folks that get into the scriptures as to right and wrong, so people make the right decisions. And when they do, America comes out on top. And we're in the process of doing that right now, as the entire world is turning our way. The President of the United States made a negotiation between Hamas, which is in Gaza, and the Israelis. Now, no one else could do that. Certainly the United Nations couldn't. Certainly the French couldn't, the Russians. But only America could do it if it had the proper leadership. And so when they made that agreement, they wanted to sign in Sharm el-Sheikh, which is in Egypt, and the president would come over to participate. He would be on the ground for 3 hours and 15 minutes. Now get this. The president of the United States is going to touch down 3 hours and 15 minutes just because he was there, just because he showed up. Over 30 heads of state, including the Prime Minister of Great Britain, the President of France, the President of the 4th largest nation on earth, Indonesia, came halfway around the world, the President of the 6th largest nation on earth, Pakistan. People came just not to say anything, not to do anything, but just to be around America. Now, you remember 18 months ago, we had a president that would get in a wrestling match with his 3-pound folding chair on the beach, and people wouldn't even stop. They'd just walk by, wouldn't even say hi or take a picture. But when the current president of the United States, with the leadership that's taking place around the globe, people recognize that America is back. And so in all times, we cannot lose faith. We will never become weary in well-doing, because in it we shall prosper if we faint not. And I'm not up for fainting, and that's why I appreciate you so much, Janet.
Amen. You know, you were talking about in 1980, and my first vote that I ever cast was for Ronald Reagan. And I believe that we have someone perhaps even greater than Reagan, where you remember, he said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. They took it out. They took it out of his speech like repeatedly, and he made it stronger every time. And so now we see, not only did the Berlin Wall come down and the people were freed, and by the way, nobody ran from the west to the east. They all ran to freedom. And we see now what the president is doing, what he did in Venezuela, what he's doing with Iran. And they said all of these women that he had released instead of executed. He said, somebody tell that to the Pope, who has had nothing but negative things to say. Well, they didn't say anything when they were, literally killing tens of thousands of their own people, executing them for protesting. And now we see we're on the brink maybe of helping out in the area of Cuba as well. You just have such a world knowledge. You've been the spokesperson for various committees and sanctions of Congress. And I just want to get your take on what you see. Let's just take a big step back and say, where are we now in world history? And what do you see? Where's your hope for the days ahead?
Well, Janet, let me just key off of what you said, and that is that America, when it loses its way, the free world loses its way, and what happened in the 1970s. The scripture talks about none of this is new. It's all in the nature of man. And when he rejects God, and there's only 2 choices. When Moses was having a struggle, and God told his father-in-law, he told Jethro, he said, we got to straighten this boy out. And he told him, he said, you need to have a federal government. You need to have a state, federal, and local, a federal, state, and local government. You have people in charge of thousands, hundreds, and tens. And Moses, there's 3 things that you need. And the first thing you need, first thing, Moses, first thing is those that fear God. Now, we're going to talk about economics and other things next. But the first thing, and this is the most important, that is that do you think that you are God, or do you think that he is God? And you need to have people that respect, fear is the old English term for respect or honor, honor God. And as an aside, you don't want to marry a person who thinks they're God, and you don't want to go into business with a person who thinks they're God, and you don't want to elect people who think they're God. Now, when man thinks he is God, he does two things. He always ends up killing. Man without God always ends up killing. And also, he has fear. He has fear. So in the 1970s, as we abandoned God and we moved towards this, then you had the eruption of abortion, taking of innocent life. And then you began to worship not the creator, because we don't believe in God, begin to worship the creation. And so in worshiping the creation, which is what we've seen in Europe, where you talk about global warming and that somehow or another, if you make enough sacrifices, that the gods will be kind to you. And as we did all of that, America really lost its way and people lost faith in it. As an aside, Janet, I'll just point out that during the Carter administration, they had the White House Conference on the Families. And it's the first time in the history of the United States under Jimmy Carter in which they declined to recognize the significance and identity of a family being a father and mother and children. They had all kinds of verbiage, but they wouldn't say father, mother, and child related by blood or marriage or bloodline. So that was once you got your eyes off of God, then you begin to wonder. So all of this stuff about that we see now, the boys can be girls, and you can't. And we appointed a person to the Supreme Court who couldn't identify a woman. That's all downstream when man forgets God. And so when America restores to understanding what America is, and so in the 1970s, the head of the Council of Economic Advisors said the question is not whether or not America will have a declining standard of living. The question is whether Americans can learn to adapt to their declining standard of living, because man left to himself doesn't know the answers. Only when he knows God's way does it prosper. Well, as you know, we turned all of that around, and America was on top again. Now, that decision in which you made a reference to President Reagan, as you look throughout history, there never has been a time in the history of man when there has been a total geopolitical shift in the world without a world war. That was the first time. Ronald Reagan came in which there was a dichotomy of the East and the West. Everybody was either one side or the other. And as he went through it, and he said that to tear down this wall, and you're 100% correct, all of the professionals, and I'll just pause and repeat and sound like I've lost my train of thought here, just to say it over and over and over. Everyone who was an expert, everyone who was a diplomat, everybody who was a Secretary of State or former Secretary of State, everybody who was an ambassador, anybody who knows anything about foreign policy, all the experts on radio and television and from the academia, they would all say, do not do this. This is not the right thing to do. But Ronald Reagan knew that it was. And I'll just tell you the aside, when the deputy, as he was getting relieved just before the day, every time a presidential speech, it's vetted throughout the various agencies to make sure the numbers and positions are right. And all of them would come back with little amendments and things. But every one of them crossed out that line, tear down this wall. And he would put it back in, they'd circulate it again. It happened several times. And so as he was leaving to go to Europe, the Secretary of State called, Secretary Schultz, and he talked to David, pardon me, his deputy chief of staff. He came and he said, you can't let him do this. You can't let him do this. And he said to him, he said, Mr. Secretary, he said, I was looking at an organization chart. And the last time I saw it, you worked for him too. And so he said, the line went quiet. He said, all right, I'll talk to him. So he goes in the Oval Office and he said, Mr. President, the Secretary of State's going to call you in a minute. And he said, Reagan looked up from the desk with a smile on his face. He said, it's about the speech, right? He said, yes, it's about the speech. And he said, he reached in the top drawer and he pulled out and he lifted up. He said, but I like the speech. And he said, I know. And so he said, and
fantastic. We're going to have to say, since I'm the president,
I get to do it.
Praise the Lord. Bob McEwen's with us. We'll be right back.
Darkness has attacked our nation, but God is raising a standard. Now is the time to wake up and shine the light across America and around the world. Believers are fighting back. Eyes are opening.
Hearts are changing, and Christ is being proclaimed. In government, education, family, media, and the church, we are mobilizing to engage culture with truth. Go to truthandliberty.net.
Hi, welcome back to Truth and Liberty. I'm Janet Porter, who is guest hosting today. What a privilege it is to be back with you. And in case the Southern Poverty Law Center has ginned up racism in your mind, well, there's a book about it that you can fight it for real, unlike what the Southern Poverty Law Center has been doing. It's a biblical worldview regarding racism. The way Ken Ham puts it from Answers in Genesis is, we're all one blood. Takes it all the way back to the Garden of Eden. There is no race. We're all one blood. And that's a biblical worldview on racism. Pick up the free book when you go to truthandliberty.net. And while you're there, sign up and be a member. This is a good soil. When you plant a seed here in this place, it's going to yield a harvest for the kingdom. And that's going to be credited to your account. So truthandliberty.net, it's a great organization, as is Andrew Womack Ministries. We're just grateful to be here rooting him on from the sidelines. We have a very special guest, the articulate Bob McEwen. I had to interrupt him in the middle of this moment because of our time, but you just got to the point where everybody's bullying up on Ronald Reagan and saying, you got to change it, you got to change it. And the Secretary of State was calling and he said, you got to change it. And what did the president say?
He said, well, I'm the president and I like the line. And of course, as you know, usually people only get one line in history. If you look up Roosevelt, and he'll say, all we have to fear is fear itself, or ask not what your country can do for you. If you look for Ronald Reagan, 8 years in which he changed the entire world. But what is he remembered for? A line that he could see. And here's the point, Janet, is that leaders are people who know what needs to be done next and know why it's important. And leaders see things, they see around the corner. They don't see what managers see. Managers see what's in front of them, how to fix things. But a leader can see over the horizon. And Ronald Reagan was a leader. We've had other great leaders in our time. Winston Churchill certainly was. We have one at this moment. But here's the important thing, that it is always upsetting to the people who can only see what's at the end of their nose. And so you'll never see people that said good things about Ronald Reagan. If you get your child's history book at this moment, and you go back and you look for anything on Reagan, it'll be only a paragraph or two, and it will all be negative. Because people, what he did is he took the entire world order, he turned it upside down, and he went from stability, from the idea that America is declining, and he put it towards freedom, and the entire world pursued it. And when you do things that are outside the way that they've always done it, brother, they really hate it. Now that brings us to our current president, who is the second example of a time in which in 2015, 2016, you've got 15 Republican candidates for president. You have 8 candidates on the Democrat side, 15 on the Republican side. And Donald Trump said there's 2 things that face America over the next day that are really important. Number one is an open border. This immigration is stealing jobs from young people that you and I used to work at McDonald's or Burger Chef or something, but now you can't get a job there because people that come here with nothing, they'll work for less than minimum wage. They'll work for, and they've stolen the jobs from all over. He said that has to be stopped so that Main Street, again, it has storefronts with jobs in them, rather than seeing America hollowed out as small town America, and Main Street is being destroyed over these last 20 years. That's the problem, number one. And number 2 is China. China is not our friend. And Janet, if you recall, and you have great political insights, and you do recall, not one person, let me say that respectfully, not one person, not one of the 15 other Republicans, not one of the 8 Democrats said he was right. And yet, because the American people knew that he was right, he took America, a nation that there's a thing, if anybody finds this of interest, and people that follow truth and liberty, they think more than your average bear. And I would just encourage you to go online. There's a thing called Fred.gov. Fred is the Federal Reserve economic data. It has all the economic data in the world. And if you look that after Joe Biden passed the World Trade Organization giving special privileges to China, privileges that American companies do not have, and began to see our nation flush out as facts and jobs and factories went to China. And the median income, the median for Americans, have been climbing every year since our founding. From 1996 until 2006, 2016. That's over 20 years. For that 20-year period, it was perfectly flat as the entire world was passing us by. And Donald Trump said, I can fix it. Donald Trump came into office, began to restore the things on Main Street, get America protecting our jobs again. And that median income jumped $7,800 in just 4 years. Now, that totally changed the direction of the country. The stock market in America went up 55%, increased by half. But here's the most important thing. The stock market in China, went down 47%. He wiped half of the wealth of China off the face of the earth. Now, who did that offend? That offended the bankers in New York that take money out of your small town and my small town. When we grew up, we put money in the bank and it was used to buy cars and loan for houses and things. It hasn't been doing that since Bill Clinton. The money is being bundled from those banks, sent to New York, and invested in Europe. And as a result of those large hedge funds, they make lots and lots of money. And we see small jobs and people in median income, their standard of living has been diminishing. People like J.D. Vance's family, it's been diminishing. The wealthy are getting wealthier. And when Donald Trump turned that around towards the little guy, and who understood that? Black men saw it, Hispanics saw it, and organized labor, people that work every day for a living, they saw it, and they voted for Trump. And who did that infuriate? It infuriated those organizations that own Disney, which owns ABC, that owns CBS, and they did everything possible to destroy his capacity because they knew that if America was strong, then they were not going to make as much money overseas. They would have to start making it here at home. Well, through the grace of God, after 4 years, he's been back in office, and let me just tell you what's happening in that regard. But there's a thing called foreign investment. And foreign investment is a place, it's an act of trust. You don't invest in a company that you think is going out of business. You want to invest in something you think is going to be worthwhile, going to work. And so for the European Union, all during the Biden years, the 4 years, the average amount of investment in the European Union was $100 billion, $100 billion a year. In the United States during that time, it was $250 billion a year. When Donald Trump came back in 2025 last year, over the last 18 months, the amount of foreign economic investment into America, this is all the people all over the planet, said, where's the future of the United States, of the world? Where is it? It's in America. Foreign economic investment in America, not in China, in America is over $1 trillion a month. Over $18 trillion since Donald Trump became president. Now, that gets back to what we did with Ronald Reagan. There wasn't anything wrong with America when Jimmy Carter was putting in the Department of Education that destroyed our educational system, that did away with his fascination with giving money to Planned Parenthood and his commitment to abortion and all those kinds of things. There wasn't anything wrong with America. It was the leadership. When we changed the leadership, then America turned around, as we saw what happened during the 1980s under Ronald Reagan. Well, now again, we're at that same precipice again, where those that had chanted for 47 years every Friday after Mass, they would chant what? Death to America and death to Israel. Notice the correlation. Isn't that interesting? Dennis Prager always said, if you want to know about a politician, you don't have time to ask him much. So ask him two questions. If you want to know where they stand domestically, ask them where they stand on life, because that's the distinction as to whether or not you respect innocent life. He said, and internationally, if you want to know where they stand, ask them where they stand on Israel. And so these people that hate America, they would chant death to America and death to Israel. America was the great Satan, and Israel was the little Satan. Well, and there were those nations around there that were afraid of Iran because of its hatred for Israel. It was developing nuclear weapons under Joe Biden and Donald and Barack Obama. And there are people that you and I know, Janet. There are people that you and I know who voted for Barack Obama. And let me just tell you one of the things that Barack Obama did. He not only cleared the way for Iran to develop the nuclear weapon, but he gave them, there were truckloads of cash. That is the forklifts of cash, whole plane loads. Now, you have to ask your question, and we should ask that question, why would he do that? See, when I want to give a little money to my children, I want to slip a little money in an envelope, and my wife says, "Why do you do that? I can just go over here to the computer and I can transfer money to our daughter or something." That's the way that you transfer money nowadays. Why would you want to give cash to the Iranians? The reason they wanted to give billions of dollars of cash, so much cash that only America could conglomerate this amount of money, was because when you finance terrorism, when you take terrorists and pay them in order to go in and blow up a bus in Israel, or to fly in to have a shoe bomber in Detroit, when you pay those people, you can't give them a check to the Republic Bank of Scotland. You can't pay them because under facial recognition, when they go to cash, you would catch that. You have to give them cash. And you and I know people who voted for Barack Obama who gave them cash because that's what they asked for, so they could finance terrorism. And the worst were Hezbollah, which is in Lebanon, had overtaken Lebanon. And what has happened just in the last 2 months in Lebanon? The government in Lebanon has now working with the government in Israel to destroy the terrorists in Hezbollah. Why? Because Donald Trump cut off their money supply from Iran. And so we see the first time the cooperation, you watch, within a matter of days, you're going to see a peace treaty between Lebanon, peace being brought between Lebanon and Israel. It'll probably be signed at the White House, the United States. Also, we already talked about Gaza, the Houthis, which are on the other side of Saudi Arabia. And all of those other nations, the UAE, Qatar, Oman, Saudi Arabia, all of these other nations that just not that long ago would not meet with Israel, would not shake hands with an Israeli. Now, because of under the leadership of this president in America, they are intertwined. In fact, when there's an attack on the UAE, United Arab Emirates, when they're being attacked, they appeal to the Israelis to shoot down the missile that's coming towards them, and they do. Now, this is a revolution. I mention this because just as Ronald Reagan left the world entirely different from where he began, and people couldn't see it, I'm here to tell you, Janet, that this is the third greatest international geopolitical change that has taken place in the world in the last 200 years. 1945, at the end of World War II, Ronald Reagan in 1989 and 1990, and the one that we are experiencing right now. I mentioned I escorted the new prime minister into the chancellery in Poland, in Warsaw, in August of 1989. And I knew what that meant, what had happened through a series I don't have time to get into now. But the Russians and the Soviet Union had gotten itself in a pickle, with perestroika, they're bragging about how open they were. They'd gotten themselves in a pickle where they were able to elect a non-communist leader of a communist country. And I knew that if they were able to do that, that either they had to kill him or the whole thing was going to come unglued. And I tried to get other members of Congress to see it, and I tried to get it, and nobody could grasp it. And so finally, I convinced Bob and Elizabeth Dole. And so he came with me, and Bob Dole and I walked this new prime minister into his office in Warsaw in August of 1989. And I knew that they either had to kill him or the whole thing would come unraveled. And so we went in there. I gave him a flag that had flown over the Capitol. Elizabeth was in the cabinet with George Bush, gave a letter. And then Dennis Deacon Sealing had joined us, a senator, a very devout Catholic from Arizona. And Poland is very Catholic. And Dennis said, we want to have prayer with you. And that's the first time he spoke in English. He said, that's what our country's been robbed of for these last 47 years. So we laid hands on him, had prayer, came out, there's every microphone in the world. And I said, this is just the beginning. I said that the march of freedom is on the side of freedom and democracy. That socialism and communism, the political force in the world, is dead. This is going to march throughout Central and Eastern Europe, will not stop till it reaches the heart of the very Kremlin itself. You know, I was flying blind, but I was having a good time. But when they didn't kill him, in fact, when I finished, I stepped back, a fellow from the embassy tapped me on the shoulder and pointed across the street. And there was the Soviet ambassador leaning against his car, waiting for the Americans to leave, and then to come in and present his credentials to the new government, which meant they weren't going to fight. And with that, the next week, Hungary went, the dominoes bang, 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 and 9 weeks later, the wall came down and the entire world changed. Now, when that was going on, the experts couldn't see it. In fact, a very interesting piece is on David Brinkley's this Sunday. It's the Sunday program. And the wall came down on a Friday night or a Saturday night. I can't remember which. I think it was a Friday night, and then all day Saturday. And so they played the Brinkley report from the previous Sunday. And so the question was, as these nations are declaring freedom, do you think the wall is going to come down? And to a person, everyone said, well, it will. I think it will eventually. It certainly will not in our lifetime. Certainly not in our lifetime. Well, it didn't just come down in their life. It came down that week, which is my point, that do not look to these expert editorial writers in the Wall Street Journal or in the New York Times, or these many of whom are, if I may respectfully say, they are shills for the intelligence services. Many of the people who call themselves experts because they teach at a particular college or they're a writer. They're also clients of the intelligence services, and they give the preferred line, and their preferred line, Janet, is not that America be the strongest nation on earth. They want America to be weak. And if you look at all of the things that the secretaries of state said under Obama, under Clinton, Madeleine Albright, when Madeleine Albright kept saying about we want a diversity of leadership. We don't want just one superpower. Now, she's supposed to be our champion, and she doesn't want it. Let me just wrap this up with this. For the last 30 years, and one of the frustrations is with Donald Trump, was that as he relied on the military, why is it that these military people could be so disastrous? As you saw what happened in Afghanistan, that they would turn over what they called the self-licking ice cream cone, the finest Bagram Air Force base that had all of these supplies. It was a listening post for China. Why would you give that to China? Why would you give it away in Ohio when a National Guard unit was returning and they were short one set of night goggles? They kept them there for an extra day until they could come up and account for that loss of goggles. We left tens of thousands of brand in their boxes, night vision. Those were the things that made America different. So under Biden, why did we give all of these things away? These four-star generals that was the Secretary of Defense, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Let me tell you why that is. Because under Biden and under Clinton, and thereafter at these war colleges, they began to teach these kids, they began to people in the war colleges began to say that there never has been a transition of power, but from the most superior power to an inferior power without a war. And that as this transition is taking place from America's decline to China, it was their patriotic duty as military officers to help that transition take place without a war. And so it wasn't to win, it wasn't to defend freedom, it wasn't to make America strong, it was to handle the diminution of the United States. And now, in order to get a star, in order to be an admiral, in order to be a general, you have to go through the war college. And so they would analyze. And if you're from Nebraska and you loved your wife and you taught Sunday school and you pledged the flag and you went to the 4th of July parade, then they would X you out. And they wanted to have people that didn't see America the way that you and I did. And that is who has been in charge of the military for now these many years. And that's why we saw this disaster under Joe Biden and certainly under Donald Trump in the first term. That's why he came in with a new Secretary of Defense who is pro-American, who's promoting people who stand as we've said. And as a result, what is happening? The entire world is coming to stand with us militarily, economically, and politically because of the new leadership that's taken place.
So we're getting rid of the general men in dresses, and we're bringing in people that are America first. You know what I love about this president is that he loves America. He wants truly to make America great again, which, by the way, was the slogan of Ronald Reagan. His slogan was, let's make America great again. But Trump truly is bringing that back. You know, when you see the people who are saying, oh, you know, he's being forced into this war in Iran because Israel's really pulling the strings. Do you really think that this guy's going to be told what to do? He knows what to do, and it's to make America great. And what he does in policy lines up with that. Now, I want to just touch on something else before we go, though, Bob. I wanted to hear all of your knowledge about what's going on in the world, but there's something that bothers me a lot, and it's the pushback now against Israel. I actually created a graphic. We want to put it up there because some of the former conservative talk show hosts are now anti-Israel. And I just want to let them know, hey, you know what? Israel is the apple of God's eye. That's what it says in Zechariah 2:8. And maybe, just maybe, we should stop poking God in the eye. We went to war in Iran because Iran themselves told us they were ready to, they had the nukes. And who were they aimed at? Death to America, death to Israel. We knew that if that were to happen, we would be toast, and Israel as well, and all other free-loving nations. I'll tell you, it's encouraging to see someone stand for America, to fight against this terrorist organization that really was killing its own citizens and pledging death to America and to Israel. But so many people now, even after October 7th, are blaming Israel for actually wanting to defend themselves. I want to get your take on that, because there's a lot of people that, even within the Republican Party, that are kind of questioning, what do we do with Israel? I just know this. I want to be on God's side of history, because that's the right side of history. And God is pro-Israel throughout the book, in the First Testament and the Second Testament. I'll get your take on that.
Well, you're exactly right, and it gets back to the basic principle, and that is of fundamental principles of God. And our nation was founded upon God, and it's a Christian nation, and that always arouses the left, and they all get all ornery. And I sometimes, well, give me, out of the 200 nations on earth, mention a couple of Christian nations that are more Christian than America, and then they start screaming about racism and Nazi and all, because there is no nation as righteous as America. It's a standard for righteousness in the world because it's committed to God. Now, when you do away with God, what's the next step? Is that then you take innocent life. And so our God, a creator of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and the Jefferson Memorial says that God, who gave us life, gave us liberty at the same time. Now, you understand the sequence, how important that is. So if I want to take away your liberty, first of all, I got to do away with God. I have to convince you that you're not special. God didn't make you unique. And so I do away with God. What's the next thing I do? Innocent life. And so you remember when it was actually Mr. Strickland who was chairman of the platform committee at the Democrat Party some 30 years ago, or 25, whatever it was, and they made no references to God. And someone on the floor of the convention said, "Well, I think we should just say 'In God We Trust' or something at the end." And they booed and hissed and carried on, and exactly, they absolutely not. They don't have anything to do with God. And so, what is the Democrat Party committed to? Taking innocent life. Now, just stop and think. Kamala Harris had 100 days in which all she had to do was prove that she was qualified to be president. She had everything. She had all the trappings and power. The oligarchs had chosen her. She didn't have to go through a primary. You know, when the oligarchs who run the Democrat Party, they just press a button. If they're with you, you win. If they don't like you, as Eric Swalwell found out when they pulled the plug on him, in 24 hours, both U.S. senators, the governor, everybody, all of those labor unions out in California, because the party is run by oligarchs. And with her having been anointed by the oligarchs, having pulled a sitting president of the United States, all she had to do was walk through the presidency. And yet you cannot find a speech that she gave. Now, I will say this. I want to be reluctant here so that you get the message. You cannot find a speech that she gave from the moment she became the nominee until the election night in which she did not spend a major portion talking about taking innocent life. Now, you think with all this going on in Ukraine, you're talking about poverty, you're talking about homelessness, you're talking about the border, they're all the things, and yet they're consumed with taking innocent life. And
let me interject something. Sure. They had a mobile abortion clinic at their convention. She did a press conference from an abortion mill, but she spent $1.5 billion running on abortion. But people seem to forget, Bob, that she lost on abortion. It seems as though, and with due respect, that even those in leadership they're afraid of it. Oh, it's a state's issue. They're all running from it. And I think it's time for us to stand up and say, you know what? At the minimum, we need a federal heartbeat bill, because we need to protect babies whose heartbeats can be heard at a minimum. And I think right now we've got too much timidity on that issue. And I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about the midterms. I'll let you respond with just a few minutes left.
Okay, but as you said, you're 100% correct. And so and by the way, the Democrat Party spent $1.5 billion. There were more than $2.5 billion that was spent by outside groups. So they spent literally billions of dollars. And she didn't have to do anything. She didn't have to get a single vote in any primary. They just anointed her, and all she had to do was walk through. But so about liberty, life, and then liberty. See, if I want to tell you what you got to put in your blood veins, if you have to wear tissue paper over your toilet paper on your face, if you go outside, and all these kinds of things. If I take away your liberty, I first have to abandon God, have no respect for your life, and then I can take your liberty. It's a sequence, which then gets back to this whole question of Israel. And that is that that party that has abandoned life and liberty and God has its threat is Israel. It dislikes Israel. So at the Democrat Party success, the victory party that they had in New York, they chanted Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar, the same thing that the pilots chanted as they flew the planes into the World Trade Center. That party, and let me just say, Janet, if I may just push back just a bit, people talk about both sides, both sides. I do not know. If you walk down the halls of the Rayburn Building or the Capitol or the Russell Building and you see Hamas flags, you see these left-wing Israeli Islamist flags, I promise you, they're only in front of Democrat offices. The people that when they chant death to the Israel, when they say that we want to intifada, what do you call it? Not internationalized, but worldwide intifada, which means from the river to the sea, which they chant all the time at Democrat conventions. River to the sea means you destroy Israel. But when you have the globalize the intifada, that means kill Jews everywhere. And Janet, I do not know of a single Republican. I don't know of a single elected Republican that does any of those things. Whenever you see that done, now people say, well, what about this podcaster or this person over here? I don't know those people. They've not been elected. They're not chairman of our party, and they haven't been elected to office. The Republican Party stands for God. It stands for life. And it stands with Israel. And that means that there's going to be a real fight as we continue to go on, because in these end times, righteousness exalteth the nation, and those who hate God do not want to see our nation exalted.
You know, when I was walking the halls of Congress working on the federal heartbeat bill, I noticed just having been away for a little while, I came back and then all of a sudden the transgender flags are all up there with the Palestinian stuff. You're right. It's very, very clear. There's a party for life. There's a party for death. I think our party needs to stand for life more boldly and more fervently. But it's very clear. What do you think is going to happen in the midterms? Are people going to get it? Are they going to understand, hey, the ones that are fueling the assassins, the would-be assassins, the ones who are giving all the slogans that were used in the manifesto of this kook who tried to take out the president, are they going to see it? Is it going to be that we can actually achieve something in this upcoming Congress, or are we going to be fighting more impeachments? What do you think?
Well, Janet, there's something that needs to be said that we can't gloss over. That the idea that when a person is laying on the street, you go up and you check to see if he has a heartbeat. That means that there's life there. And the person that did that was Janet Porter. It was her idea. She got the bill passed and is sweeping our nation. And this country is greatly in your debt. In the time of what's going to happen, it's up to whether or not Christian voters show up. It's 100%. That's the bottom line. If God's people show up, we win. If they don't, if they have an Awana meeting that's more important, we end up losing. God bless.
Thank you. God bless you. Now's the time to talk to your pastor so that they can be salt and light at this critical time in our history. Bob McEwen, you are a gem, and I'm so grateful that God spared your life. I know you faced a critical operation. I'm just so grateful that you're here to be the strong voice that you are, and I'm privileged to have you on the program. And if you want to be a part of the solution, just be a part of Faith, of Truth and Liberty, truthandliberty.net. Pick up your free book on how to combat racism with a biblical worldview. Thanks again. God bless you, Bob. God bless America.